while ago we were talking, and I thought it was totally adorable the way you talked about your grandfather, the immortal Emanuel Feuermann, and his love of women. So what would you like to share with the world?
Well, this is my impression of him from photographs and from things people told me. He loved the ladies.
I see.
And it seems that the ladies loved him. I would not presume to imply that while he was with my grandmother and married to her, that he was a philanderer. That's not the impression I have. But for sure, he was a charismatic man full of magnetism, not just as a cellist or a musician, but just as a human being in the world. And I think my impression is the ladies were really drawn to him, and he clearly was drawn to the ladies. And so I like to imagine him, he was kind of an international playboy of sorts, I like to think, I like that idea of him that way.
Well, we were just going through some of the family photos together, and it's true. There's so many of them sort of surrounded by 3 or 4 women at a time.
Yeah, and I have no idea who those ladies are.
I see.
Not a clue. I'm sure my grandmother was, a European lady.
Beautiful
of a
woman
certain
also.
era, gorgeous, yeah. And she had she had a figure, she was like va-va-voom, so I think, not that really has anything to do with infidelity, but, it's just clear that he was a real man of adventure, and, people were drawn to him.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. And my aunts, all my tantas, my aunts that were my grandmother's age, my great aunts, whatever, they were all ladies, obviously. They all outlived their husbands by decades. And they also had great stories, and they would blush, and, everybody had great stories about him and liked to reminisce about his character and his adventures. And he seemed to be surrounded by ladies.
When they would blush, they were talking about
him, but there was always a little bit of, I
see.
He was very clearly married to my grandmother, but he was a famous man, and he traveled a lot, so I imagine, I don't know this for sure, but it seems like over the years, various people in the Reifenberg side of the family, knew him, and if he came to their town, they would see him, and things like that.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Musicians on the road. I think that since the beginning of time.
I see.
There's a tendency. He loved cars. I think he could have been a race car driver. He loved to drive fast. He was completely colorblind, apparently. Really couldn't distinguish. And Katya, Andy, who taught here at NEC, my beloved Tanta, she died at 106 and a half.
Wow.
Oh, her stories are incredible. Anyway, she used to be in the cars with him a lot. But she would always say that he couldn't, when they'd get to a light, and he couldn't tell if it was red or green.
Wow.
So as they would be going much too fast, and she had such a great sense of humor, she'd tell these great stories, and he'd be charging to this light, and he'd be like, is it red or green? And she'd be like, red. And he'd be like, red, really red, or my red, which means I should keep going. They couldn't, so sometimes she was like, they ran right through these red lights, and he would just be thrilled with all the excitement of it all. And he just loved these cars.